It takes courage to follow your dreams. And sometimes people who are so much more afraid inside than you are will try to stop you. You have to believe your answers are out there for you. You have to believe you deserve them. And you have to believe that they will lead to something. So you just have to be willing to stay focused on in your own belief and not be pulled sideways.
Why is asking such a lost art, and how do we get it back?
Everybody's afraid to ask. I mean, as little kids, we ask who, what, why, when, where, how, and we get squished by parents who say, God, you ask too much, Jeff, don't you get it? And then you go to school and the same thing, just sit there and learn, listen to all this stuff. We're going to teach it to you. If you wait long enough, maybe not. And in the military, and then the same with business. So people get squished down. Then I want to talk about the other point that you brought up first, is that we have 50 million Americans unemployed right now. That's just not okay. And so we think everyone has got to be an entrepreneur. And I define an entrepreneur as somebody who finds a problem, like you've been looking for, and asks brilliant questions, finds a solution, scales it, and then makes a massive, vast profit, right? Because, you know, to him who much is given, much is required. And I think everybody watching your show, all of your thousands and thousands of listeners, need to know that they've got greatness in them. They've got money-making power in them. And why we wrote Ask is that we're saying, hey, look, we've learned, and it came out last April 28th, is to have two people go through every question in the book, and they will have a transformative, positive, life-enriching experience. Like we just had a woman write us this long letter, said, I was in the doldrums, and all of a sudden I read this, went over all the questions with my next door neighbor, and my life has totally changed now. I'm now optimistic, bright, I'm feeling shiny and new, because you ask questions that wake you up. When I went bankrupt, I said, oh my God, what if I go bankrupt? I checked the book out of life, how to go bankrupt by yourself. So, you know, you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong result. We're teaching how to ask the right question to get a great, positive, buoyant, exuberantly good result. A couple of days ago, I was on a podcast for Amazon bestsellers, and which you'll be on in the future. I'll help you get there. And the guy said, you are the Roger Bannister of books. And I thought, I happen to know who that was. The guy who did the 4-minute mile, but once he did it, 119 people did it the next week. And I'm saying somebody's going to try to break my record, and that's to everybody's benefit. The more people reading, the better. I'm all for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. In the world we live in now, do they even sell 500 million books in a decade now? Like, nobody reads anymore.
We're 30% up this year because everyone's in what I will call a COVID cocoon. And as a result, people are reading more than ever, and they're buying it all from Amazon, which our book Ask goes to Amazon too. And you have a book in you, but it is amazing the time we're in. We're going to sell more books than ever. And that's number one. Number two is because of what we're doing, like with you podcasting, we talked to 10 million people on a podcast in Vietnam, and the books went skyrocket there. Now, they're not related in America, but the sales are good for us. We take the money.
Yeah. So you're saying, when you say they're not related, you mean you obviously get the money for the sales, but they don't count towards bestseller lists and book sales counts and stuff like that, right? Yeah. I mentioned, you guys, I've got a book coming out next year. We're shopping the publishers right now, which means lately I've been getting a crash course in how they tabulate book sales and all the nuances. And frankly, there's some kind of gray areas around what's a sale. Like if I go order 500 copies of a book for, to have at my live event, and then I sell them individually at the event, I don't get credit for 500 books. I get credit for one.
That's right. It's crazy. So you don't see a lot of those bulk orders. You don't see a lot of things. And then of course, if you want to do, if you want to just buy them direct from the publisher and sell them, you don't get credit for those either. So you could do massive volumes of books,
right,
selling at live events, and they're never going to be seen. But hey, it's okay. The money is what matters. And what's even more important is that people are getting your message in their hands. So
exactly,
a lot of ways to do it.
And books, all of what my wife's saying are the most transformative tool other. Now, no question, podcasts are the new TV, but up until now, books have changed everyone's life. I mean, like, I can go through 10 or 20 books that have just changed the world again and again, like Relativity, E = MC². If you didn't have that, you couldn't have Elon Musk. It's that simple.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And especially I love books because of who they're accessible to, which is everyone. There were times in my life, now if I want to know how to do a thing, I'll go find the expert at that thing and hire him for consulting or go join his mastermind or whatever I got to do to get that access. But there was a time in my life when I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And fortunately I did find a few nickels and I was able to go buy a book with those nickels. But I mean, it doesn't take much to get, and you know, I feel like I came of age entrepreneurially. I was learning from Robert Kiyosaki. I was learning from Tony Robbins. I was learning from Ayn Rand. I was learning, you know, these luminary minds because I could buy books. And it's funny now, the younger generation, I have 4 kids. They're not big readers.
Yeah, it's a little troubling because I mean, we've always encouraged our kids to be good readers, and they are. Your kids are a little bit younger than ours, but books have changed our lives completely. I mean, one little book can completely turn your life around, and that's really powerful. You know, you buy a $16 or $20 book, and you come out the other side of that book a different person. So it's important to remember that. And I think for people like you and for us, those books that we've read have been completely transformational. So don't underestimate the value of just a book. Spending time with a book, it can totally change your life and your perspective and your understanding.
And both of us have been exactly where you are, where you got to rub 2 nickels, can't rub 2 nickels together, and you're into have-notness. And what we're teaching now is that if you learn to ask through the 3 channels, ask yourself, ask others, ask God. When I was bankrupt and upside down in 1974 and went down $2 million in a few minutes and thought, oh my gosh, my self-worth is gone. Because my self-worth and net worth I thought were the same. They are not, thank God. And for 6 months, I'm sleeping in front of another guy's room and thinking devastating thoughts and reading stupid stuff like the New York Times, all the bad news fit to print. But then I started learning these questions that we're now trying to teach everyone. I kept saying, okay, God, what is my destiny? God, what's my destiny? God, what's my destiny? And I woke up and I said, whoa, I'm supposed to talk to people that care about things that matter, that would make a life transformative difference. I go to my 3 roommates for breakfast at Hicksville, Long Island, New York, and I asked them, I said, guys, anyone young that's not a lawyer, doctor, Broadway star, celebrity, or musical prodigy that is speaking? I said, yeah, there's a guy a few years older than here out in Hauppauge. Here's my ticket. You go use my ticket and get in. I raced out to Hauppauge, watched this guy, Chip Collins. He became my great friend for 3 hours, just mesmerized the audience. I go up to him at the end and I ask, I say, hey, look, I'm Mark Victorinski. I take you to lunch and learn how to do what you do. He said, look, dude, chance you making is 1 in 1,000. You ain't going to make it. So go do a real business. And the interest rate was 28%. So the businesses were dead at the time. So I take him to lunch. He tells me what to do if I do it in the life insurance business. I did, Tony Robbins and I, the 2 guys, we talked one time that did 1,000 talks a year the first 3 years, because if you take massive action, you get massive result. And everybody in my little audiences, insurance audiences, 6 people, 10 people, 12 said, man, you're a great storyteller. Do you have that in the book? I finally did my first book, Stand Up, Speak Out and Win. It was for I sold 20,000 copies at $10 each to little itty bitty audiences. And I said, Jeff, this isn't a New York Times bestseller. It's not a national bestseller, but it is my bestseller. I want to sign to you, your 4 kids, and a dog if you have one. They all laughed and bought it. And I made $200,000. And today that's like $2 million. I mean, I just was flying high, had new car again, clothes. It was just, so everybody out there that's hanging on by their fingernails like you were, and we have both individually been, not collectively, but individually, we want to get everybody out of that. And it's a change in head, a change in thinking. Mindset changes your money set, and that's what you know and are profoundly good at as the Millionaire Secrets.
Yeah, it's so true. And man, I mean, if ever there was a time the world needs to get that, it's clearly right now. You know, I don't feel guilty, because guilt's not an emotion I keep much stock of on hand, but last year was economically the best year of my life. You know, it just absolutely exploded because I feel like it's because, you know, while everybody, and you guys are clearly the same thing, you got 2 new books out, like everybody's been sitting around in flat-footed recession mode, but like the world's still turning and there's massive opportunity. And usually when there's a massive shift happening, if you proactively get into it and get ahead of it, I mean, that's when millionaires and billionaires get created. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously I know more about your Ask book than I haven't actually so much looked at. I know you have another one, right, about everybody's got a book in them, which I totally agree, because I'm almost done writing my book right now, but I'd like to talk a little bit about this Ask book. It feels like something that so many people so desperately need right now. Can you dig a little deeper on what it's all about and kind of what compelled you to write it now, or when you did?
Sure. I mean, Mark and I are so fortunate and blessed to be able to get together with so many people around the world. We've spoken to so many audiences. And what we continue to see, and I know you can relate to this, Jeff, we see people that are super talented, probably have four times more talent and ability than they'll ever need in one lifetime. But for some reason, they're falling short, right? They're not making it. They're not making ends meet. You look at this woman who could be running a city and she's hardly getting by. She's just so smart and so capable, or some guy that should be running a company. Mark and I really take that seriously because we love people. We want to help. And we have this time we spend together every morning, sort of a prayer meditation time. So we started asking about it because that's what we do. We question everything every morning. Are we on track? How can we contribute? And we were saying, what is it about people? What thing, if we were to teach a tool that's probably one of the most important tools, what would that be? And in reflection on our own lives, we realized that, we've been down in the dumps. We've had tremendous adversity. People look at people like us and think it's always been, rainbows and butterflies, and it has not. So we started asking, what did we do to get out of those situations? How did we raise ourselves up from every adversity? And the answer came to us. It was our ability to ask our way forward, to be able to formulate the right question at the right time, to get the right answer, to take the next step. And so as we dug a little deeper, the only mechanism that has the ability to reveal what is hidden more than anything else in the world. And what happens to people when we're stuck and things aren't going well, we usually stop asking, or we're afraid to ask. And we did a lot of research on the book, and we could in the book about people's fear of asking, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but I'll let you comment just to what I've said so far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can simply say, from my own relevant experience is just so affirming of what you just said. I mean, I think even 2018, I sold my agency. I was 39. I was like, well, I wasn't like filthy rich, but I could have been comfortable for the rest of my life. Like, do I retire? I'm 39. What do I retire? And it was a process of asking sequentially deeper and deeper questions about what could I do? What should I do? What does the world need? What value do I have to offer? What do I love? What can I, how can I synthesize the answers to all those questions and ask a still bigger question that would be, what could I embark on that would, and ultimately the question I finally got to was, what could I embark on that will only be successful insofar as I become the absolute best version of myself? What is it that I could take on that would require the most growth from me personally in order to create the most good from me personally? And it was asking the best questions is what got me to the best answers. This is the first time I've gotten to meet you guys. I've, I think my parents had a copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul laying around the house when I was a teenager. I mean, it's not my first exposure to you guys, but certainly it's our first time meeting. I feel already this deep sort of ideological alignment around, first of all, what's possible for human beings. Crystal, I was reading on your website about your obsession with human potential.
Yes.
And I share it. I say all the time, I think I have it's probably a medical problem. I don't know. I cannot see people the way they are. I can only see them the way they could be. Yeah. Which means a lot of times I'm talking to you. I'm talking to like your best, brightest, most effusive self. And you're trying to play small in the conversation. Like we might not even be connecting because I'm talking to who you could be, not even necessarily who you are. And I've gotten to where I won't even apologize for that. It's whether it's my gift or my curse. I don't care. It's me and I'm rolling with it. But also what you were saying, Mark, about how the world squeezes this out of people. It's first, it tells people not to ask so many questions of others. But I think implicitly, it's also getting them to stop asking great questions of themselves. And the leftovers is what most people call a life. It's just what you're stuck with when you stop asking good questions. So and that's why I started Entre. Ultimately, the answer I arrived at was, this is why I went into education. Yeah. Is get into the mind of people, this change the way they think, or else you're never really going to change what they do and what they have. But how, what am I even trying to ask? Like, how do you guys feel? And I'm asking selfishly as a tactician, how do you get into people and relight that pilot, that spark, to get them to start seeing how flipping great they can be in a world that is battling so hard against that effort?
Right. No, such a good question. Find the ask journey in 3 parts or 3 channels through which we all need to learn to ask as we come back to life, in our asking journey. And now those are ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. And each of those channels is equally important. And here's why. Asking yourself is that reflective journey. And it is striking to both of us how few people do that every day. And so people say, well, what do I ask myself? I don't even know what kind of questions. And there are so many questions you can ask yourself. We talk about so many of them in the book, but I basically say there are 3 critical phases to the asking yourself part that will get you moving. And those are, where am I now? Again, amazing how few people stop and take an inventory and say, where am I now? What's working? Am I even happy? Do I like what I'm doing? Questioning, understanding where you are at right now. Because if you don't start to understand where you are right now, you cannot form a plan to move forward, right? So it's, where am I now? And all the sub questions that come out after that question. And then the second critical phase of that is, where do I want to be? And that is so important. And Mark and I say, ask that question from this beautiful place called your imagination, because we're the only animal on this planet that has an imagination. God made us with imaginations. It's our creative power. It's how we co-create our lives, right? And so we say, ask from the nth degree of your greatest success, right? Where do I want to be from this greatest point of my greatest nth degree of success? And start to ask yourself those questions backwards. What am I doing every day? Who am I serving every day? What products, what services? What is unique about that? How is it serving humanity? How is it serving my family? How do I feel about it every day? And in that way, you can literally start to engineer your life backwards from this perfect place in your imagination around you right now, and going, look at my life, and trying to build your life on what's not working. So that's the second critical phase. And then that final phase is, so it's, where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what specific action steps do I need to take to get there? Because, we're in this physical journey on this earth. So we have to always, put our action into motion in a real physical way, and take those steps every day. And I tell you, once you start asking these questions, your brain, what happens in your brain is something really interesting. And studies show this. When you ask yourself a question, a different part of your brain lights up. And it's the part of your brain that does critical thinking. So suddenly you're asking questions and your brain literally becomes a greater resource to you. Okay. But once you start to do that, you will start to get answers. Ideas will come to you. And that's the point at which you need to move forward. And so that's the journey. And I'll let you comment about that. We can get into the asking others part too, because that's really important too.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's camp on what you just said though for a minute, because it sounds so elegantly simple, right? Ask where you are now, ask from your imagination where you'd like to go, and ask what steps you need to take to get there. I mean, I have a 4-year-old girl that I could reasonably explain that to, and she would get it, right? But we all know, in fact, it'd be easier to get a 4-year-old to do it probably than a 40-year-old. But there's so many impediments to the execution and between the asking of the question and the receiving of the answer, the fears, the insecurities, the doubts, the judgments, the emotional baggage we carry from our childhood and whatnot. How do you guys kind of help people implement that? And I mean, it's in the book, I could read the book, but I'm curious if you can kind of articulate how you help people sort of arm themselves or prepare themselves to do that effectively, and to not just come out of the book going, oh, that was a great book, what am I going to read next? But ideally come out of the book and be like, okay, I'll read another book next year, because for the next 12 months, I have so much to do now just from the book I just read, right? Like, how do you guys have any methodology for getting people into that action space that it really takes? And again, I'm asking selfishly because I'm trying to do this for people right now.
Yeah. We love your question. And first of all, you're exactly right, spot on. And that is what we say is there's 7 roadblocks to asking, the thing that stifles, stops, thwarts, and cements them, puts them into cement. And the first one is a sense of unworthiness. The second one is naivete. Third one is doubt. Next one is excuses, something called excuseology. Next one is pattern paralysis. You know, the old thing where my teacher's teacher was Einstein, and Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing and expect a new result, you're cuckoo, which in English is crazy, right? German. And then that last one is disconnection, where you just get unplugged. We can go into any one of them. And the beautiful thing is, we wrote everything we knew about how to get us back to what you said, is how do you ignite that? And what Crystal brilliantly said to you, everybody out there has got to reignite themselves with new, better, life transformative questions. Then number 2 is that how do you overcome all these things? And once you read them, you're looking in the mirror and you say, holy cow, I'm here to transcend my adversity. I'm here to take my adversity and turn it into my advantage. And that's for everybody listening, because all of it, life challenges us. Life's the greatest university ever in experience. And you know, we want to, like you, we want to help. And then that third thing I said is that everybody has got to recognize that they're an entrepreneur inside. And once they do that, they'll quit working for the man or the job or that, and they'll start saying, hey, wait a second, something here I can fix, and I can do something simple. And I'll just give 2 quick examples. One, Arthur Fry has the glue that makes these little yellow stickies. He gets 1% for life for Post-its. He made himself a billionaire by telling 3M, hey, look, this is going to be the biggest product. And they do 50 billion Post-its a year because of one guy's one idea. The other one, I met the dentist who created dental floss. And Zig Ziglar's great line was, only floss the teeth you want to keep. Right? But the point is, every one of us had a piece of string and never saw the benefaction of it. And what I'm saying is, everybody out there can innovate. Everybody out there can create. Everybody out there is going to have endless supply if they just ask the right question. As far as I know, we've got the only book that has everyone metamorphized from, say, a caterpillar through the cocoon into a great, beautiful butterfly.
Yeah, I need to introduce you guys to my friend who invented the Breathe Right strip, because he asked the question.
Breathe Right. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, the Breathe Right strip, because he asked, he's a great friend of mine. I met him in St. Paul, Minnesota, when I was up there performing a musical that I wrote. And he was a patron of the arts up there. We partnered up. He helped me produce the show and a whole story there. But he basically was down in his basement going, how do I earn the right to go back to sleeping in my bed with my wife, because she had booted him out because he snored so damn loud and neither one of them could get any sleep. And he was just, all he wanted was to get back to his bed. And he spent 5 years in his basement, basically putting a Band-Aid and a toothpick together to create this thing. I mean, there was a lot more science to it than that. So you didn't rip all the skin off your nose with the adhesive, but you know, the nose is the oiliest part of the human body. So trying to get something to stick to it without making it so sticky that it tears your skin off, you know, you can't put glue on there. There's a lot of science to it, but he spent 5 years trying to crack it, obsessed with one question. It's like you're saying, you know. So okay, here's a question, and I'll use my friend as an example. He has this, he gets obsessed with clearly what was the right question, which is, how do I solve this anatomical issue for myself? And as it turned out, I think, you know, they've sold they sold the brand for $2.1 billion. I think they've sold like 100 billion Breathe Right strips or something, right? So clearly it was a systemic issue. But inevitably, after he got obsessed with that question, all these other people around him got, you know, in that weird gossipy way that people get when somebody else is on fire with something, obsessed with trying to knock him off his passion. Why are you down in your basement so much? Why don't you go get a real job? Why are you trying to chase this, you know, crazy idea and this and that? Why are you trying to write another book? Why, Mark, who are you to be an author, man? Or an author, not an author, but you know, people, it's like when you finally get the right answer to the right question, it seems like so often the world around you gets really obsessed with interfering. Do you have any methodology that you help people with to like find that silo that they can stay in and block the rest of the world out?
Well, we have a section in the book called Prepare to be a Good Asker. And you really do need to prepare, because as these ideas start to come to you and breakthroughs, people will start to question it, because, you know, it takes courage to follow your dreams. And sometimes people who are so much more afraid inside than you are will try to stop you, or they'll question you. So the first part of preparing to be a good asker is belief. Belief is number one. You have to believe your answers are out there for you. You have to believe you deserve them, and you have to believe that they will lead to something. And you really need to commit to yourself in that belief, because you're the only one who can commit your beliefs to that. So you just have to be willing to stay focused on in your own belief and not be pulled sideways. You have to stay centered and stay grounded in your own belief. And then, of course, the second part is the visualization, because with every question, you know, every amazing breakthrough, innovation, invention has come through a question just like this one, like the dental floss, right? How do I get that out of my teeth? What would work the best? That sort of thing. But then the answer always comes through the imagination. So really being prepared to spend time with yourself in a basement with your imagination if you need to, because, you know, that's where you connect to your highest self, to your greatest ideas, and to God. I mean, you know, being able to ask God for guidance is so important, because wouldn't you want to go out to the creator of the universe, to infinite wisdom, where all that space, that really high space, that's when amazing things happen. So it is important to prepare. It's important to be galvanized in your own beliefs.
Yeah, amen. I feel like that's almost probably an equally important and challenging skill beyond it, right up there with asking the right questions, is the ability to follow through on the answers to those right questions without getting distracted and bogged down by the questioning of all the doubters that are going to emerge. And typically the better your idea is and the hotter your passion burns, the more interference you're going to get.
Well,
in my experience.
Example of that, yeah, is Elon Musk. They told him to shut down his plant in Freeport. The governor said, you cannot build.
Yep.
And he immediately said, well, what's needed? And he looked around, they said they need respirators for COVID. He called 3M and said, you can't make enough. I've got all the metal, I got 3M, I got 90,000 employees. And yes, he made them, but he also made 90,000 cars, became the richest guy in the world by, the point is, he didn't buy the dollar, he didn't buy the government, he didn't buy the economy, he didn't buy the shutdown. And now this week, they're saying, we're not going to sell you any more nickel. So what I'm betting on is that he's going to find the biggest nickel deposits in America. I don't know how he's going to do it. Doesn't matter to me how he's going to do it. All those people that are doubting him and they're selling him short, I'm telling you, Elon is a genius, because he does, I never saw it quite as a second point like you just articulated eloquently and elegantly, but he is going to find the solution, right? Because I'm asking every one of the people listening and all the people you're going to rebroadcast this to, decide to be the solution, not the problem. Because remember, there's problems, they're always going to need fixing. And once you solve a problem, here's the greatest poem ever, as far as I'm concerned. The poet laureate in Denmark, I'm of Danish descent, as you know, is Grooks. And he said, what the world needs now is problem solvers galore, because each problem we solve creates problems more.
So true. It's so true. I got to ask, have you guys ever read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand? Doesn't Elon Musk remind you of Hank Rearden?
Absolutely.
That when we were talking about the metal fabrication, I just thought of that. Like he really is like a fictional character. I mean,
He is. He's amazing. He's so unfailing. His belief is so unfailing in himself and his vision. And he is just a perpetual asker. He just keeps asking what the next answer is, what the next solution is. And he has unfailing belief that he will solve it. And crazily, he always does. And how many times has he been written off, like again and again and again? And it's sort of like Mark. I mean, Mark and Jack were turned down 144 times. 144 different publishers turned them down. Who keeps asking after they're turned down 144 times? Only someone who's a bold asker. And 500 million books later, here we are. So it pays to be a bold, unfailing asker. You know, it really does. You have to have that unfailing belief in yourself.
Thank you. Can I add to that, please?
Of course.
So Elon Musk, we just got, he says he's the world's greatest expert on Nikola Tesla. And we just watched the videos of him on YouTube, which everybody can watch. And Tesla, when he was born, had electricity come in. And the midwife said, oh my God, he'll be a son of the devil. And his mother said, no, he's going to be a son of the light. And the guy, when he saw what he could do, he did it. And what I'm saying is, when you go to higher levels of asking, right, it goes from conscious to subconscious to superconscious to God conscious. What those guys did is go to higher levels of asking and consciousness. And I believe both Tesla and Elon, is his best student, goes to saying, how is it I can solve this problem and do stuff that no one's ever done before? That's why, back to the premise of your whole show, ladies and gentlemen, we're going, if you'll learn how to ask with us, and we want you to get a copy of the book, Ask, of course, because we've got a bestseller as Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Destiny at Amazon. And then join askthebookclub.com, because we want to take you to the highest realm. What you said is, how do you make, and Crystal uses exactly the same line, how do you become the best version of yourself? It's only by asking yourself, asking others, and asking God, and do it with discipline, do it with desire, do it with decision, and do it with a formula and we're formulaic.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which will show you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So I have to share with you guys, I don't know if you've done this. You might have heard that little audio disturbance that happened while you were talking just now. It's because over on the other screen while you were talking, I Googled most rejected, I don't remember what I Googled because I had to close it really fast because an ad started playing and that's what that sound was. So I closed the page, but I Googled like most rejected by publishers. And an article came up of the 10 books that were rejected the most by publishers. And you guys were number 2.
Who's number 1?
And then the ad started playing and I was like, oh, crap. And I had to close it real quick. So I don't have it up in front of me. I think it was called Dick Wimmer.
I don't know that person.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure they didn't sell 500 million copies of that. But I'll tell you what number 3 was.
Who was that?
It was one of my, it's probably, it's a great book. I don't know if it's one of my favorites, but I love it. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah, of course.
Robert Pirsig. That was rejected 121 times.
Yeah. Well, almost everybody got rejected, whether it's Stephen King or Louis L'Amour. I mean, we put all of them. I did a chicken soup for the writer.
J.K. Rowling got rejected.
Oh, she was homeless pretty much and stuck with it. Also, The Alchemist. The Alchemist has now sold 150 million books. And the publisher, he did get published, but his publisher was so disappointed with his sales in the beginning that the publisher dropped the book. And it took him a long time to get someone to pick it up again. And now 150 million books later. And so it's about sticking with that vision. When you know what you know, you have your answer.
Do you think that, because that's something I've, I guess I've been told, and I would say I've reasonably learned about myself, is that one of my muscles that is pretty strongly developed is the ability to have a vision, a pretty big vision in many cases, hold the vision and do all the thankless work associated with pursuing that vision until eventually other people can start to see it, right? On the basis of your results. I can do that. You guys clearly can do that. Do you think that's something that can be taught, can be developed, has to be at least somewhat, nascent from the beginning? Do you think it is something that's in everybody, but some people get it beaten out of them? Because to me, it seems to be the greatest determinant, that and just, good old fashioned delayed gratification and grit. Seems to be the greatest predictor of people's having really big success in this world, is that you can hold a vision that other people don't see, and you can work on the basis of that vision, despite what anybody else has to say about it. If you can do that, and then also endure delayed gratification, you pretty much, it's just a matter of time till you make it in this world. So I'm curious, do you guys think that everybody has that, or is it more selective than that?
I think think it can be taught. I absolutely do, just based on the clients I've worked with. I mean, a lot of people who have gone through a lot of failure, you know, and really don't have the confidence or the wherewithal to keep going. If you expose yourself enough to the right people and the right ideas, and you're consistent with that exposure, because we all need that positive exposure and we all need to learn the models. Most people don't have the models. So because they're so unfamiliar, they don't grab onto them like maybe you did, as quickly as you did, Jeff, or someone like you. But I think if we expose ourselves to the models and we immerse ourselves in situations where we're with people who can teach us those things and mentor us, absolutely, I think anyone can learn it and can completely transform into becoming that person who is able to break through.
So on that note, I'd like to ask a question individually of each of you. When was it in your life when you became, let's say when you believed that you were going to do something great?
You know, I was at a young age. I think in high school, I found high school to be really easy, and I accelerated my curriculum and graduated at age 16 and married my boyfriend, who was 5 years older than I at the time. And so, you know, not a great life plan. 2.5 years later, I find myself divorced in a new city by myself with no family, no friends, and honestly, no idea of what I was going to do to support myself. So I did, the only thing I could think of at the time was to apply for food stamps. So I remember standing there at the grocery store line, you know, the cashier, ready to check out. And I had this unbelievable epiphany. And it was like, for a second, for me, time slowed down. And I felt like this spotlight was shining on my head. And a question dropped into my mind. And I'll never forget it. The first question was, how did I get here? Followed immediately by this second question that was, are you doing what you can to get out of this, or are you taking the easy way out? And that question was so profound in my mind. It's like I heard it in my thoughts, and I instantly knew the answer. I knew that I wasn't doing everything I could. I knew I wasn't tapping into my resources. And honestly, Jeff, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what they were, but I just knew. I knew the answer. So I had this pivot so quickly that by the time I turned the food stamps over to the cashier, I had so much conviction. I was saying to myself, and I'll never forget that moment, like looking at her, I probably had a fierce look on my face because I was saying to myself, this will not be my future. And I went home to my little apartment where I was getting eviction notices every month. And I didn't have any answers really, but I realized I had questions. So I just kept asking. I was like, who would hire me tomorrow? What job, what skills do I have? And as I started asking those questions, I remembered hearing on the radio about, you know, start working tomorrow. And so, like Kelly services. So I called them up, asked how do I apply? I filled out the paperwork, and I started doing these jobs. You know, some would last 2 weeks, some would last 4 days. But I started learning all these different businesses. And fortunately, I had worked in high school. I worked at my dad's law offices. I had worked at a clothing store, you know, the hottest clothing store in town. I thought it was really a lot of fun. And so suddenly I'm filling in at attorneys' offices, and I'm, you know, working at convention centers doing sales. And from that point, I decided I love sales. I decided to put myself through real estate school. And so in the meantime, someone had approached me and said, you should do some modeling. So I thought, what do I have to lose? I went to the biggest agency in my city and said, we asked them if they would sign me. Unfortunately, they did. I ended up doing some television commercials, which went national. So about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half later, from that moment when I was turning over those food stamps, I now am working for the largest home builder in our valley as a licensed realtor. I became the #1 realtor in my company, and I'm getting all these residuals from my television commercials. So I ended up joining Screen Actors Guild and getting like the best insurance benefits for myself and my son. So I can't tell you how many times I thought back to that moment, because my life changed 180 degrees. And it would have been so easy for me to slide down that victim trail, you know, that I was headed down. But so I really reflected on that as often as I could. What changed that in that moment for me? And it was the questions. And I was so thankful that I had the ability to ask myself the tough question. and have the courage to answer it. And I think for all of us, that's really important. We need to be able to ask ourselves the tougher questions sometimes and have the courage to answer those honestly, because let's be honest, we have to parent ourselves sometimes. There's nobody else, right, besides us that's going to do it.
So, and the internet hiccup, just briefly, when you were saying the question, I want to make sure I caught it. When you were at that moment, your critical moment, you asked yourself, am I doing everything I can do to get out of this situation? Or am I just,
taking the easy way out?
Taking the easy way out. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean,
exactly.
What a question. You talk about asking the right question. I mean, there's probably 100 million people in the United States right now that should get obsessed with that question.
Right. Exactly. And
am I doing everything? Not am I doing some things?
Right.
Not am I doing enough to make a good show so that it looks like I'm trying real hard? I mean, am I doing everything imaginable?
That's right. Because the question you ask determines the path that you're going to take and the results you're going to get. I'm bankrupt and I say, I'm going to be a professional speaker. And I go, wait a second, you've never spoken. What the hell are you doing? And then I said, I'm going to be world's best-selling author. And they go, I hadn't even written a book yet. This is pretty back to what you said about vision. And, Solomon said, without vision, we perish. So if you translate it, with vision, we flourish. And everybody now needs a new vision. If you do it from a spiritual point of view, remember the 4 models. I say the spiritual runs the mental, which runs our physical, which runs our results. If you go to the spiritual level, all of us have a destiny. And that's why we did the subtitle of Ask, the bridge from your dreams, your destiny. We're saying we believe everybody was coded at birth with a macro destiny. And then maybe you got a little micro destinies of what else you're supposed to do inside of that. But you've got to deliver by asking yourself the questions that'll determine the path that you're going to take. And I don't know a better book to launch than ours based on the 100. Yesterday, she went through, a couple of days ago now, 101 letters from people go, oh my gosh, your book just at the right time and the right place. And I can't thank you enough in my prayers. And go, wow, I think this will be bigger than Chicken Soup. And Chicken Soup's been pretty good and great to us.
If lightning strikes twice, that'll be something. So okay, Mark, hot seat for you. The moment you knew you were going to do great things.
I think I've had a destiny moment a couple of times. I think when I went bankrupt and finally came up with that question, and all of a sudden, miraculously, they gave me the ticket to go see Chip Collins. He told me exactly what to say. And he said, you'll call on 10 people, one will finally say yes. So the next day I called on 10. I had nothing else to do. And insurance offices are all next to each other, sort of like Burger King is next to McDonald's, next to Taco Bell. And, so you go from State Farm to the mutual benefit to money insurance or whatever. The last guy I call on 6:30 at night, there's no secretaries, nobody around. It's just this guy and I, and it's Metropolitan, which at the time I was in New York, that's the #1 company, insurance company in the world. I go in and this guy weighs 450 pounds. I mean, this guy's a substantial, guy named Tony. And I do my little presentation that Chip had said. I said, you want to pay for it or have your secretary cut the check? Well, hell, I knew there was no secretary there.
Right.
I'm a big guy, Mark. I can cut the check, but I really like you, kid. You're going to make it in here. And by the way, here's a directory to all the guys in Metropolitan. I want you to know who I am. I said, who are you, Tony? He said, I'm the #1 office and the #1 company in the world. You got it? You call everybody. You tell them Tony called you. Well, hell, that was a destiny moment because I had the guts to call on somebody. It was after dark. I had a knock on the door to get in. There's no reason except that there's lights on and there's a Cadillac. Back then, a Cadillac was, you didn't have Mercedes and Teslas yet. The Cadillac was a big car and it was brand new. So it had to be the boss, right? And he had to open the door, let me in. And he thought I was coming to see if I could apply to get the cell insurance. But he and I, he hit it off and we were great friends after that. But he gave me the directory and man, I flew. That's why I could do 1,000 talks. You give me a directory of buyers and tell me that this guy sent you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, let me unwrap it for all of you. I'm asking you on behalf of the three of us, right? And Jeff, I think will give me permission to add him in this. If you don't believe you got the power to ask, all you got to believe is Crystal, Jeff, and Mark believe you got the power to ask. We are holding up the mirror and saying you got 100% power to ask positive, correct questions to advance your life, advance your career, advance your relationship, advance your understanding of God and unlimited good.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. You said that way. It's one of my almost mantras or marquee lines is I tell people, like, it's okay if you don't believe yet. You can borrow my belief, interest free. Just pay me back when you're ready to take it over for yourself. Like, it's because it's true. It's like I said, I see people the way they could be. And really what that means is I see people the way they would be if they were asking the best questions.
That's so awesome. I love that. And we need to be able to borrow beliefs sometimes. And we all need people to believe in us. And that's why it's important to be a part of a positive, life affirming group of people that, are part of your network. Because you really can grow and flourish if you're in the right environment. And if you're hanging out with people who aren't that way, you need to consider maybe not spending as much time, right? Because if you're constantly with people who are dragging you down, you will start to take that on. I mean, you're like the people you hang around with. So that's an important consideration too.
So speaking of people you hang around with, and in respect of your time out, this will be my last question, because I know you guys have to go here soon. But I'm guessing you two are the people that you hang out with, that each other hangs out with the most.
For sure.
How did you guys? I mean, it exudes. If people are listening this on a podcast, you're not seeing what I'm seeing here. It just oozes out the screen from these two. Like, they're just magically. The energy, they're great. It's 1 + 1 = 11, right? It's visible. How did you guys find this, and how did you guys build this together? I mean, I know that's a ridiculously big question for a small answer, but give people a tip, because I think that's something that so many people long for so deeply.
Well, I think just for me, I mean, Mark and I were both married before. We were in marriages, and I wasn't ever terribly unhappy, but there was just something missing in my first marriage. But I always felt in my heart that I deeply wanted this person who I could just bond with spiritually, intellectually, and just have this deeper connection, this emotional connection that I didn't feel like I ever had in my first marriage. And I knew that person was out there. I felt it. I could imagine it, but I didn't have any idea how that was ever going to happen. And the way Mark, and then, it was interesting how my marriage just, ended up not working at this one point. And my mother sent crazy. I think I had put that energy out for such a long time, and Mark had in his own way, and I'll let him talk about that my mom called me. I had my coaching practice at the time, and she said, Crystal, I was partially through writing my first book called Pure Thoughts for Pure Results. She said, you need to go to this event. I just got an email. It's Author 101. It's in LA. I was living in Scottsdale. My practice was in Scottsdale at the time. She said, there'll be publishers and publicists there, and Mark Victor Hansen will be there. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay, Mom, when is it? And she said, it's the day after tomorrow. And I go, oh, that's going to be sold out. I can't go that soon. And she's like, just call. You need to get exposure for your book. I'm so excited about your book. So just to humor her, I called. The guy called me right back. The promoter of the conference called me back immediately, said, no, we have space for you, Crystal, come over. So a day and a half later, it was like it had a life of its own. I'm at this event. We're in the VIP room. Mark was the keynote speaker, and a woman, I decide I'm not drinking. I'm not even having a glass of wine. I am all business. I'm going to talk about my business, the breakthroughs my clients are having. It's just too important. Ironically, this woman's talking with her hands. She knocks a glass of red wine on my white pants. An entire glass of red wine kind of jumped on my white pants. Mark's over in the corner surrounded by a bunch of people. And he must have been looking my way as I'm talking to a speaking coach. He breaks through his crowd and he comes over, grabs my hand and says, I am so sorry about that. I think I know where the club soda is. Can I help you find some? He pulls me out of the room. He was my knight in shining armor. And from there, we just started talking. And he said, I'm starving. After we, introduced ourselves, he said, I'd love to hear more about you. It just sounds amazing what you're doing, but would you like to go have dinner? And I said, yeah, I'm starving too. It's 9:00. We hadn't eaten. So I end up going to dinner with him. And it was like we'd known each other forever.
So we get out to a greatest restaurant in Hollywood, right? because I said I got to go off premises. There's thousands of people and they all want 2 minutes of my time, and I didn't
Right.
stay here. So you know that problem. So we get there and there's a long line, and $100 bill won't get me in. So I just said, well, she just emanates out beauty, like you could see her modeling and TV and starring and all that stuff. So we just go up and the guy, I missed her question. I'm goofing around because I just want a seat. And I want to take her out because I don't want to go somewhere else. I said, I was being silly. I said, you don't recognize her? That was mine's on steroids going.
Right.
I read People magazine. I read everything. I don't recognize her. He says, come on, tell me, who is she? Now I'm joking because we're both of Danish descent. I said, she's a queen of Denmark. He starts by saying, no, she's not. He says, oh my God, she is. Who are you? Back to questions. I said, who travels with the queen? He said, you're the king. Hold on, I got a table for you like that. Wow. But that's the way our relationship's been, because if you learn to ask questions, your relationship becomes magical. It becomes mystical. It becomes, you go in sometimes through portals to alternate reality, which is what you've done to build an exuberantly exciting business for you that I know just by listening to you, it absorbs your mind, heart, being, and soul, and you're helping so many people.
Well, that's an incredible story. So I have to ask, Mark, I think it's probably time for you to come clean and share, how much you had to pay that lady to fill that wine.
Back to asking questions.
That was so smooth, Mark.
I know. I wish I could have. I didn't know her. We met her later. She is from El Salvador. We have a lot of international people show up wanting to write books. But what it really happened is I'd asked myself what I wanted in my ideal woman, the qualities, the values, the virtues. I'd written down 267 things I needed to have in my, we had to have exactly the same value. She had to want to travel. She had to have her own business, make a lot of money, not marry me for my wallet. And I never told her until after we were married, and showed her the 267 out of 267 things. I'd written down victory next to all of them because she was every one of them. Because if you're not clear in your asking, you can't be clear in your vision. You can't be clear in your results. You can't be clear that it's going to outpicture, because you can determine where you're going to go, the path you're going to lead, and a destiny you're going to get to. And we want everyone, our destiny is helping everybody get this book and listen to our audio on it if they can't read, to get to their destiny.
That's probably a great punctuation mark, talking about destiny, clarity, planning, having high standards, not settling. You had 267, you said?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
267 requirements for the woman that you wanted to be with. I mean, most people don't even have two.
That's right.
Most people, the only requirement is like, there's two requirements are like a pulse, and they say yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
But she, because my mother was an alcoholic, she could not be into alcohol. She could not be into smoking, because I'm not going to kiss the. But I mean, I knew what I wanted, and I knew what she never smoked either. So, right. She can't want any drugs, right? I mean, those are the negatives. The positive is she had to be attractive. She had to want to exercise every day. She wanted to do herbs and vitamins, and both of us take a ton of nutraceuticals, because I'm going to live to be 127th officers for renewal. I want her to be healthy, whole, and complete also, and we do it. We're sort of amazed at how many both of us took every day before we got together.
We can have a funny separate conversation about that. I'm kind of a supplement junkie myself, but anyways, guys, this has been incredible. I wish we had 3 times as much time. I feel like we could talk for hours. But all good things have to wind up. So how can the world, I mean, beyond the obvious of go to the damn bookstore and buy, there's probably a whole shelf of your books. How can people come into your world and maybe access you more, either personally or some of your other services? Obviously, I know, Crystal, you have a whole, other business beyond the books. Right. Like, where would you want to direct people right now?
Right. So yeah, of course, first of all, just get the book. I mean, it's just such a breakthrough book I know everyone's going to love it at Amazon. And then go to askthebookclub.com. We really would love to have you join us, askthebookclub.com. And that'll really, we've got a bunch of events planned this year. We've got some really exciting stuff happening. So that'll be a way for us to stay in touch with each other. We'll let you know about the event coming up, and then, reach out to us on our social media. We have all kinds of stuff we're posting and events, like I said, coming up, and new programs that I'm launching. So Yeah. Crystal Dwyer Hansen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the above. And of course, Mark Victor Hansen. And yeah, let's stay in touch because we want to help.
And we're YouTubers now. So seeing as I've written 312 books, we're going to have tons of stuff for them to go look at and stay in touch, and they can ask us questions, and we're going to be able to answer them on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, all that.
If you love entrepreneurship, then you'll want to keep watching. So click the next interview right here for some more Millionaire Secrets Gold. Thanks for watching.
The more you can be intentional, purposeful about your life and make a difference, the natural you have a high, and then you can live and you can build things. So few people are really healthy and wealthy because it's easier to take a pill than to get your ass in the gym.